Well, let's look tonight at Matthew 21:5. And I guess it's been about 2 weeks ago, our pastor was preaching in this section in his series on asking, what questions from the Bible. And he made mention talking about the donkey, and was talking about how Jesus rode in on a donkey. Well, I'm not sure what his message was after that, because it seems like sometimes he'll be preaching and God just gives me, I don't know, my mind just grabs something and he starts just pouring stuff into me, and I'm looking for a pen, looking for a pencil, looking for bulletins because the back section is blank, and I'm just filling it up with thoughts and things like that. And I have been dwelling on that donkey for 2 weeks. And so that's what we're talking about tonight. We're going to talk about, why did God choose a donkey? And maybe the more in-depth question that is, I'm sure, something that you would hear from the greatest theologians ever to step foot on this planet is, what kind of donkey are you? You may not have heard that from a theologian, and you're not going to hear it from one tonight. But it did pose some questions to me that when I started kind of studying on donkeys, it was interesting. It wasn't just an animal, from the Bible. And I kind of want to get away from that just a second and talk about it. I know that when the boys were small, we would go every year to Eider. We'd make plans to make that trek, that 4-day trip to Eider, and I'd get myself cleansed to be able to step on enemy soil and make the trip down to I can't even say the word.
Alabama.
Yeah, Alabama. And so we'd make the trip down there, back to the way it still is today. Everybody just uses a mule to ride around and stuff. Don't have our cars down there much, but anyway, we got out there and we'd go to the mule pool every year. I don't know how many have been to the mule pool in Eider every year. Maybe not every year, but been. If you have never been, that is worth the day. In fact, I'm not going to miss it again unless I have to, because what's amazing is that you have these guys. Some of them are Amish, Mennonite, or some of them are just farmers that they use every day, and they'll hook up these mules. And I'm not talking about some mule that you pass in the pasture driving down towards Lafayette or Ringgold or something like that. We're talking about animals that wouldn't go through that door back there. I mean, these are beasts, and they'll hook those things up, and you can tell the guys that know what they're doing and the guys that are just in it to win the check. And they'll back those. They'll go in there and they'll have all these little signals and hand signals and ha's and he's and clicks and stuff. And the guys that really know what they're doing will walk in there with those 2 mules. And they'll just do these little clicks with those reins and stuff, and those mules will back up, and they'll hook that rope onto those mules, and he'll tap them just a little, and they'll walk up, and they hook up tight to that big sled. And sometimes that sled is pulling, I'm not talking about just like 2,000 or 3,000 pounds. I mean, it gets up to like 24,000, 26,000 pounds. And those 2 mules, as soon as he hits those reins, he steps to the side, he just clicks them, and they feel that load, and then they just bear down and they start pulling it. And then you'll have the guys that come in that they're just doing it for the check, and they just want 2 strong mules that can get that to the other end, and they really don't care how it happens. And they fight those mules. I mean, I've seen those guys get drug all around that arena. They will fight those things, and they'll bring them all the way around and try to throw that rope on there while they're moving just so they can get it going. Those guys, I'm not really sure they know what they're doing, but they're there. But the mules that are the most impressive are the ones that know who their master is and what he wants. They're the ones that he don't even really do anything. He gets them out of the truck, and he brings them down there, and he hooks all the harnesses up and everything, and he's standing there talking, and they're standing there looking at him like he knows what they're saying, and they know what he's saying. And they walk out there just like it's a normal day at the farm. And then you get to talk to these guys, and sure enough, it was a normal day at the farm. They use them to pull stumps out. They use them to still use them every day as working animals on their farm. And there's a difference in that. So when I got to studying about, and I didn't put a ton of time into it because I'm thinking, okay, really, I know of 2 stories in the Bible that have donkeys involved. One, of course, we know is Balaam, when he is told by God not to go with the enemy because they wanted to put a curse on Israel, and he gets on that donkey, and I'm telling you, I can kind of relate sometimes. I feel like I've talked to a few myself, and they've talked back. But he gets on that donkey, and he's riding down the road, and there's an angel with a sword, and the donkey sees it, and he doesn't. You know why? Because the donkey knew who his master was. So he's walking down the road, or the donkey is, he sees it, and the first time he goes out in the field like, I'm getting away from this, I got to go around him. And old Balaam's beating him with his staff, saying, get back on the road, get back on the road. So the angel goes to another place right down, and this time the donkey decides, well, I'm going to go on this side of him, and he crushes Balaam's foot against the rocks. And he's beating him with the stick again, get back on the road, The next time, there's nowhere to go. What does he do? He lays down. And Balaam's like, what is wrong with you? And I can just see him standing there, beating that poor donkey about half to death with that stick, saying, get up, let's go. And then it turns around and talks to him. I mean, what a story. I mean, if you're just bored with the Bible, you ain't reading the same one I do. I mean, Hollywood don't even come with talking donkeys much. The only one I know of is, it didn't talk, but it kicked a football, was Gus. Field goal kicking mule, that was one. I don't know of any others where donkeys just jumped up and started talking. Shrek, yeah, that's fake. That's not even a real donkey. That's a cartoon. I'm talking about real donkeys. Shrek. Donkey. So, but what I'm saying is that the donkey turns around and says, basically said, well, what are you doing? Do you not see? Do you not see what I see? No, because his eyes were fixed on the wrong master. So, that's one story from the Bible. The second story is where our pastor was talking about the other day, but I did find out that in the King James Version that the word donkey is used over 400 times. That men, wealthy men, had herds of donkeys. Why? Because that was all us poor guys could buy. It's all we could afford. All we could afford was a donkey. We had to drive a Ford. We couldn't afford a Nissan. Those were foreign donkeys. We didn't buy them anyway. But I'm saying that the richer landowners, the ones that had herds, they would have camels. But one of their main, what they had the most of were thousands upon thousands of head of donkey. And there was different donkeys. The more expensive ones were white. They bred them to be white, and that's what the royalty used. And then the ones we know of that are all nappy and gray and brown, maybe some of them got a stripe down their back. I guess the striped ones are faster than the others. I don't know. I'm not a donkey expert, but I do know that they had them because that was all the poor people could afford. It's not been proven, but it's And because the Bible doesn't really say it, but the speculation is that Mary and Joseph left to go to Bethlehem on a donkey. So that's what I'm saying. The poorest of the poor, the humblest of the humble, had donkeys because that's all they could afford. And then there was the group that was actually under that didn't even have that. I did find out in my studies that donkey milk, that don't even sound good, does it? Donkey milk was richer, higher in protein and higher in sugar than cow's milk. So a lot of the people, when they got donkeys, they wanted the, what's the word? Female donkey, but there's a word for it. A genie. That's right. I couldn't come to me. That's what they wanted because they could use her not just for the everyday work and everything, but she also had milk. Okay, Donkey 101 is over, maybe. But what I want to get to tonight is that, you know, the Bible talks about us being sheep, and that's because sheep are dumb. We are, a sheep. Let's go into sheep 101 a minute, because there is a kind of a distinction between the two and why there is a difference. Sheep 101 is sheep. They possess qualities that we possess. One is, a sheep will flip over on its back and it will die on its back because it doesn't have sense enough to flip back over. Their wool is so thick that when they flip over it flattens out, and they basically just don't have sense enough to struggle enough to get back over, and they'll lay right there in the sun and die from heat exhaustion. They also will not drink out of running streams because it scares them. That's why in the 23rd Psalms he says He leads me to still waters, because we're the sheep, we have to drink out of still water, not running waters that scare us. In other words, we are much better off in the peace that Jesus gives us for our nourishment than we are from what this world's chaos can bring us. So, another thing about sheep is that when a shepherd is having a sheep that is a trouble sheep, he is the sheep that runs off, got to constantly go find him. He will discipline that sheep. The first time he will, basically whack it real good with a staff a couple of times, try to keep it in the fold. If it won't do that, then the next step is he breaks its leg where it can't run off. It's terrible, isn't it? I think it's a pretty good idea. I mean, I'm just saying. Don't nobody come in here with a broke leg someday, and if you did, it wasn't my fault. But I will say this, that the reason he breaks their leg is two reasons. He does it, they can't get away anymore, but he don't just leave them there. The shepherd will carry that sheep on his shoulders until it's healed. So the sheep will know that even though I am the disciplinarian, I am also the one that loves you more than everybody else. So when he brings, let's put ourselves in those shoes, in those hooves. When God has to break our leg, He doesn't just leave us. When He has to discipline as His sheep, as His children, He doesn't just leave us. He has a plan, and He carries us through that rough spot that we're blaming Him for, that maybe we didn't even get ourselves in that trouble. Maybe He gave us that. Or maybe it's just the opposite. Maybe He didn't, but He's still carrying us through it. So that when we come out on the other side, we realize who was really in control and who really had our best interest no matter what. So let's go back to the donkey. We're talking about, the Bible talks about us being sheep, but let's go back to that donkey real quick, because what happens in this story is pretty amazing. Brother Jeff brought that out the other week about, that Jesus told the disciples, go outside the city, go to this certain man. There's going to be a donkey tied up to a tree, something there, and you just say, if he says anything to you, this is what you tell him. Y'all know the story. If you don't know the story, that's basically it. Jesus says, go out and get this donkey. If the owner says anything to you, you tell him, I said is okay. And he ain't going to say nothing else to you. Just go do what you're told. They go out. They find the donkey. They bring it back. Now, here's where we get into kind of where we are. What kind of donkey are you? What they went out and found, you can see the scripture there. They found out a foal. It was a very young donkey. So let's start classifying our donkeys tonight. Now, I'm not going to split you up and make you sit in this section and this section and this section. You can just in your own mind decide what kind of donkey you are. And then you can decide what kind of donkey you want to be. Maybe. So a young foal was what was tied up to the tree. So here's an interesting fact about that. I did grow up on a farm a little bit. My uncle had a big farm down in Whitwell, and I would go down there in the summers when I was real young. He was in a wheelchair. He was in World War II, and he had both legs blown off in the war, and so he always needed help on his farm down there. And it was about 5 acres of just stuff. Had a silo. He had about an acre of sugar cane, which I absolutely loved, because I could just go in there and cut that and strip it back and chew on that pulp, But he also had a donkey, and I remember the donkey. The donkey would bite you. Good night, he would bite you bad. And then I get to reading about this. I never knew they're very good protectors. And we'll kind of get in that in a minute, but I can remember being on that farm and that donkey out there, and I knew I was not getting out in the pasture with that donkey. If he wanted me to feed him, I just throwing it over the fence. I wasn't going in there with that thing. And he was young, and you wasn't going to ride him. You wasn't going to use him for a whole lot right then. So it is amazing to me of the fact that they went and found this young donkey. They brought him back for Jesus to ride, and I can just tell you, he probably never had anybody on his back. Not a foal. There's a lot to the process of getting them ready to be used. But just like the donkey in the story of Balaam, he knew who the master was. When they brought that foal back to Jesus, I have no doubt that foal looked at Jesus probably right into the soul of that animal, and he knew, this is my Creator. And think about the story that he had when he got back to the farm. I carried the Creator of the universe today. I don't know if he did that, but I would think that he knew. All creation is crying out. Creation knows who the Creator is. So he carries the very Son of God through the streets of Jerusalem, laying down their coats in front of him, waving palm branches. Anybody in here ever rode anything like a horse or anything like that? Raise your hand if you have. Did anybody wave any palm branches in that thing or throw down stuff in front of him? No. It happened to me one time, and I've never been on a horse or anything since. I was about 8 years old at Lookout Valley High School at a fall festival. And if anything knows about Lookout Valley, they caught that horse somewhere over around the chow time, and I was on it, hanging on for dear life, screaming to the top of my lungs, get me off this horse. I'll never get on another one. I haven't. I don't think I've been on another one. Scared me to death. You know why? Because he got spooked. They were shooting like musket rifles, doing demonstrations. Boom! They shot that thing there when he went, and I was on him. He got loose from the guy, and the guy told me he's a young horse. I just remember, I can remember just thinking I was going to die. The horse was running out in the middle of Cummings Highway. I was on it. Couldn't get off. I was afraid to get off. You know why? Because he was a young horse. He'd never been around anything like that. And they had him there for the pony ride part. And it wasn't a pony, it was a horse. And I got on him, and there I went. He was young. So Jesus gets on the back of this donkey, this little foal, rides him through the streets of Jerusalem. Incredible. But he knew who his master was. But there was something else about that young donkey that we're going to relate to. How many of y'all know young Christians right now? You know what happens with a young Christian? They don't know any better. They're awesome. Young Christians are incredible because they don't know any better. They haven't been churchified. They haven't been told, you're not supposed to do that. Yeah, I understand there's church discipline, and I hammer down on that pretty heavy sometimes. I understand they need to act like something, and I understand they need to wear clothes that are appropriate, and I understand all those things. But what I'm talking about is they haven't been churchified to the point where they're no earthly good. They're on fire. They tell their friends about Jesus, and they're not real concerned about that. It used to be, oh, you're going to hurt their feelings. Let me tell you something. Our teenagers today are tougher than nails. They have to put up with a whole lot more than I did. Somebody hurt my feelings in school, I was on them. Now they just have to put up with it. Because if they do something about it, they're out of here. So, but these young Christians we face, and they might be somebody this age right here, this age right here. I'm not going back a row. Don't get your hopes up. Or this age right over here. They don't know any better. They have a zeal. They have a purpose. They have a fire that. But you know what? Some people are saved at 30, 40, 50, 60 years old. And you know what? That same fire just seems to happen. Doesn't it? So you got the young donkeys that just don't know any better, but all they want to do is please their master. But then you get into those donkeys that they've been rode a little bit. Those middle-aged donkeys that have done work. They know what it is, but they've also been beat with a stick a lot. They've also been like that donkey, Balaam's donkey, and they've been whacked with the Baptist stick a few times, saying, hey, you don't need to do that. That ain't right. Hey, I didn't like what you was wearing the other day. Hey, you know what? You're a little bit too much in the service. You're a little too loud. Or, hey, how come you're not giving $100 every time they say we need something? Or, hey, I just don't like the way you do things. They've been beat with that Baptist stick a little bit, or that Christian staff that we will label church discipline, or that's not the way we do it here. And we become those middle-aged donkeys that I'm just going to do what I have to do. And that's it. Yeah, I know who my master is. But I'm just going to do what I have to do and get out of here. And then we get to the older donkeys. Like there's several types of this. You get to the guys at the Eider Mule Pool. They'll take those things right up to there, and the guys that really know what they're doing and they know who their master is, they know what their job is. They back up. They obey the master. He gives them that little nudge and they're gone with the task. But you also get into sometimes the mules that all they want to do is be bitter. They just stand around and look at all the rest of the mules chewing. You've seen them. I mean, everybody's seen them. standing around and really what they're doing is just finding somebody to chew on. Because them donkeys are mean. I have been hurt more in church than I have ever dreamed about being hurt out in the world. It's not even a close race. It's not even a close race. I can go to the place that I work right now that is supposed to be a place where we have all these rules where you can't offend people, you can't use this language or that language because if it offends this person, then you'll be reported and all that stuff. I don't have any trouble. People come to me all the time and say, hey, would you pray for me about this? And I know they're not a Christian. And I ask them, why are you having me pray about it? And they said, because we just don't pray. Well, I somewhat understand that. Why am I expecting somebody that don't even know the Master, don't even know Jesus, to be what it's supposed to be anyway? I can't hold them to the same standards that I hold myself or hold you to. So, there are those, unfortunately, that all they really want to do is find out something wrong with everything. They have forgotten. They have forgotten what's right about things. They have forgotten how to find the right in things. I'm telling you, there's probably some in here right now, Jeff, you'll have to vouch for this. If they come up to Focus on Wednesday night 2 weeks ago, me and you'd probably be down at Pentecostal church this week. It was turnt, man. If that's the right language, right? He didn't know that word. He didn't know. I'm more hip than he is. But I'm just saying, it was amazing to see about 80 kids or so that from the time the music started till the time it was over, I feel like they were genuinely excited to be there. Would y'all have enjoyed that up there? No, I don't think so. Wrong kind of mule pull. But I believe that we have to be very careful, church, in getting to that point of bitterness. Because I'm just going to confess some things. My wife says, "Oh, great." I hate when he does this. I'm pretty transparent. I don't mind people knowing whatever you need to know about me. I don't really have a problem with that at all. But I have just got to the point, this church has helped, really. I've just got to the point where I trust church anymore. One of our previous churches hurt my family worse than I could have ever imagined. To the point that I'm just getting to the point where I've forgiven them because they were following a man that I really don't know what's in his head. I have not forgiven him yet. I'll just go ahead and tell you. I'm going to be honest. You can judge me if you want to, and you can say, what are you doing up there? But y'all are welcome to come up here and take my microphone and jump up here and go for it. I have a hard time forgiving him. I have a hard time forgiving the pastor that deliberately hurt my family, and we just about lost everything we'd worked for between foreclosure and cars and everything else. I was full-time at that church, and I walked in right before a Thanksgiving service, just a week before Thanksgiving, and because I had stepped up to him and say, I don't think this is something that our church really needs to be doing. And it wasn't something our church needed to be doing. I walked in on a Monday morning and he said, I want your desk cleaned out before noon. You're fired. And I had my desk cleaned out before noon and I was gone. No explanation to the church. And then the man gets up and says that I had been caught in a sin and he had to ask me to leave. And tried to destroy my reputation. Needless to say, he has been through 3 churches since in 2.5 years. And he is getting his reward. Am I happy about that? I'm struggling with it. because I don't really want anything bad to happen to anybody. But I will say this. We have to be very careful, church, about what we do in church. Because sitting next to you tonight is probably somebody that's hurting about something. Maybe they don't know Jesus. Maybe they're here tonight to see a boyfriend or a girlfriend. I don't know. Maybe they're here tonight just because that's what we're supposed to do on Sunday night. You be very careful that you don't turn into that bitter old donkey sitting there. And to tie it back to the sheep, because that's what we truly are. The Bible describes us as sheep. We will lead people astray because we want it our own way. That's what the Bible says. We will become so heavenly minded that we're no earthly good to anybody because we get this self-righteous spirit that goes on, and I've been doing this my whole life. I know everything there is to know about church. I'm not interested in how much you know about church. And I hope nobody is interested in how much you know about church. I want to know how much you know about Jesus. And I'm just going to challenge you. I am just going to be blunt and challenge you. If you're not telling somebody about, at least inviting people to church, at least telling someone that, hey, Jesus can make a difference in your life. I'm not talking about you go out and preach a message to them, but if you need to, do it. If you are not doing those things and making a difference in people's lives, and they have to ask you, oh, I didn't realize you was a Christian. And you've been working with them for several years, or they've known you for several years, guess what? You are not doing what you're supposed to be doing. It's as simple as that. And if you are one of these that have been in the church your entire life and feel like you fulfilled everything, I want you to go back to the Bible and read the Old Testament. Because I know none of y'all are over 900 years old. Some of you's close. But I know you're not 900 years old. I'm just telling you, there is no retirement from work for working for Jesus. It don't happen. You don't get to a point where you say, I've paid my dues. What if Jesus would have got to the point after He was beaten, and right before the cross He said, I've paid my dues? We'd be Adventists trying to work our way to heaven. Now, I'm not. Ain't going to be. Have no desire. Because we just can't do it. So my challenge for you would be this. Number one, maybe ask yourself, well, what kind of donkey am I? That's something to ponder, isn't it? You know? If you're one of those bitter ones, let me confess something else real quick. Because this is a list I have. I have a list of way I don't want to be when I get old. I don't have a bucket list that says I want to go skydive or I got to have a convertible when I'm 49. I don't have a bucket list of things that I want to do. I have a bucket list of things that I don't want to be. And when we go into a new church, I always tell my boys, I have every church we've been at, I give them people that I trust for them to look up to. I don't go in and say, okay, man, they're a good person, they're a good person, hey, they're all safe here, this is a great church. No, sir. Not after what we've been through. I always go to my boys from the day that they were old enough to understand and say, that person, look up to them. That person, you need to look up to them. There's a role model for you. You say, well, God, you sure are judgmental. Call it what you want. But my list is compiled of things that I don't want to be versus the things that I hope I get to do. And one of those things is I do not want to be bitter. When I leave this earth, whether it's next week or when I'm 95, good night. That's a long time. That's almost a century. That's amazing. It really is. You just don't see it anymore much. But whatever my age is when God decides that's enough, and it might be here in the next couple of minutes and He wants me to hush, I don't want Him to find me bitter and just be a church member. I want Him to find me if whatever I am doing is working. I just have no desire to be that. I don't want to be a hindrance to somebody. And I hope I hope you have decided in your life what you really want to be. Because I'm telling you, we're in a community that's looking for somebody that knows what's going on. We just are. And I just want us to be sure as a church, with our pastors leading and our deacons leading and all the heads of our committees and departments and stuff like that, that everything we are doing is going towards reaching somebody, not just making ourselves comfortable. I have no desire to be comfortable. I'll be comfortable at home. I don't like to be comfortable here. In fact, church is not really, maybe for the Christian, you need to come in here and get uncomfortable. So, not going to have an invitation tonight. I just want you to think about, maybe some of the things that made some kind of sense. Ask your question. I'm going to ask the question to yourself and be honest with yourself. What am I? And don't come to me afterwards and say, hey, was I on your son's list of people to look up to? I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you. I don't reveal those things. I just tell them. I'm very protective of my boys and my wife. And I'm just going to be. Just going to be. Okay? So let's pray. And y'all will be dismissed. Lord, take what you've given me tonight, Lord, and use it. Lord, as we read your word and all the stories from the Bible that are incredible, Lord, and these two stories about, the donkey there that you sent to Balaam to say, hey, what are you doing? He knew the master. Lord, this donkey that you chose to ride into Jerusalem, he knew the master. Lord, may we as your children know the master and follow and, Lord, without any question, do what we're told to do. And it's very simple marching orders, Lord. It's to go out in the hedges and the highways and compel them to come in. Tell them about you. Get them to come to church, Lord. Come to a saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. Lord, we're all yours this week. Lord, be with those that where you've taken some precious people home in the last several weeks, and Lord, we pray that you'd be with those families. Lord, be with our pastors. You're away from us right now at the convention, Lord. Lord, let some of those men that are trying to change the way that our convention believes, Lord, show them the truth and the error of their ways, Lord. Lord, we pray that you would be with him as he comes back to perform a funeral on Wednesday. Lord, that is just a celebration of a man that, Lord, that brought joy to a lot of lives. Lord, we put ourselves in your hands this week. Let us be what we're supposed to be out there in this world, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you. You're dismissed.